All right, my name is Jeff Demansky, and I am very happy to be working with the town of Gardiner to be potential partner for the launch of a community choice aggregation program for the town of Gardiner. And so we're doing a number of public information meetings and a number of outreach strategies to help build awareness about what community choice aggregation is. And it's a couple of things. I'll just say that to start with. There's a couple of different opportunities around the energy marketplace within this, but it's the topic of our conversation tonight. So I'll provide an overview. Again, I'll just ask folks to please keep yourselves muted when you're not talking. We'll definitely have time for questions and answers at the end. Feel free to use the chat window if you want to share a question or a statement or a suggestion. And I'll try to keep an eye on that, but I'll certainly pick up the chat window at the end and make sure we're addressing any questions that are in there. I'll probably present for about 35 minutes or so, walking through the slides. And then again, I'll stop and we'll have lots of time for questions and answers. All right, so let me just move this over to the side here. And so this is the topic of our conversation tonight, this exploration of a community choice aggregation program, or CCA. And I will use that acronym because it's so commonly used by folks who are working on CCA programs and those communities that are exploring using it. And so these are my 3 bullets in my agenda for tonight's presentation. I'm going to talk about what is community choice aggregation and some why communities are considering launching a community choice aggregation program. So some basics on what it is. And then second bullet is talking about the JEWEL CCA program, including current programs. And JEWEL is the name of an official administrator that was approved by the state to be an administrator and to support communities in their efforts to potentially launch a CCA program. And JEWEL was selected. It's a company based in Westchester, New York, and it was chosen by Gardiner and a number of other communities to be the administrator of a program. And this is where I can jump down. I'm Jeff Demansky, and I am the nonprofit partner selected by JEWEL to be the local program manager for CCA programs here in the Hudson Valley. And I'll explain our roles a little bit further down too. So there'll be definitely some explanation about our organizations. So in that second bullet again, though, I'll talk about some of those current programs that are happening here in the Hudson Valley, describing other communities that are doing it and giving a sense of what the partnership looks like, to give some detail about the what and why of community choice aggregation programs, including talking about how the program's doing. What are some of the benefits of those communities that are currently in a community choice aggregation partnership. And then I'll talk about next steps so folks can know what it looks like, the timeline and activities that are part of this exploration and part of this potential launch of a community choice aggregation program. So without further ado, I'm going to move on. And again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat window and or save them for the end, and we'll definitely discuss. So in one slide, one sentence, what is community choice aggregation? And this is our one sentence that looks like poetry, but it kind of breaks out the importance of different components about what this is all about. It is a policy that enables municipalities to determine default energy offerings, which include electricity supply, but also community choice solar or community solar. So already there's the 2 components of what the community choice aggregation program contains. And the municipalities do this on behalf of their residents and small businesses. All right, so just to revisit this a little bit, it's a policy meaning that it's enabled by New York State. So the state allowed this to happen in 2016. And this is based on this idea of offering a choice for energy by residents is the same marketplace. It's based on the same marketplace that's been in existence since the late 1990s in New York. Back in the late 90s, New York State was one of a number of states in the United States that deregulated the energy markets, meaning they broke up the monopolies that the utility companies had on creating and supplying and delivering energy to customers in New York. So because of this, utility companies, and I'll repeat this statement, utility companies became delivery companies. They just make money on delivery. And I'll show you a utility bill. I'll show you actually my utility bill on an upcoming slide where we can emphasize what the difference, the way a utility bill is broken down. It's broken up into different components. And because of deregulation, though, because utility companies are only able to make money on supply, they do not own the generation sources, or they're not able to make money on those generation or supply of electricity. There is a marketplace that was created. So all utility customers are able to choose an energy supply source. They can't pick how it's delivered. And that again is the utility company. That's what Central Hudson does. It has the poles and wires and the substations, and it has the arrangements for billing too. That's all part of being a reliable delivery company, kind of like FedEx or UPS. But where the packages get made that they deliver, where the energy is made, where it comes from and how it's made, is a choice that consumers have had available to them in New York State since the late 1990s. And I'll talk a little bit more about that choice that people have and why they would want to exercise choice. But what happened with community choice aggregation was that starting in 2016, the state allowed this policy that has to be led by a city or town or village, a municipality, by passing a local law that enables them to create a new choice, a new default choice for where that energy comes from and how it's made. It is replacing the default choice that the state had set in terms of the decision making. The current state default for a community that's not in a CCA program is that the utility company makes that choice for them if they don't take advantage of that energy marketplace. So if somebody does nothing about the energy choices, then they are exclusively going to get the delivery and as a pass-through cost supply decision made by the utility company. What this program does again is it gives the municipalities the ability to aggregate together with other municipalities to have leverage in this marketplace to get a very competitive new supply choice at a very competitive rate. And for us, it's a focus on electricity supply, and that's why Gardiner's interested in this. Community choice aggregation can be used for gas, but our program is not focused on gas because we cannot improve upon the environmental attributes of gas. So for Gardiner in this exploration and the other communities that are working on this program with us, it's a matter of improving the supply of electricity in terms of the environmental sourcing of it. So getting it from renewable sources. So that is what this program is about and why it was allowed. So to further explain that, it kind of helps to see a menu of choices that people have before a CCA program launches in terms of electricity supply. Now, again, there's two different programs that can be facilitated by a community choice aggregation program. Remember on the previous slide, I said it could be for electricity supply and for community solar. Right now, I'm just talking about electricity supply, and I will talk about how that differs from the community solar choice or solar choices that people have, using a very similar slide to this. But now, just focusing on electricity supply, what are the choices that a utility customer in New York State has before them, before a CCA program launches? Well, there's two, and I'm going to repeat myself here, but those choices are, one, that the utility company can make the choice for them as a pass-through cost. Again, they don't make money on this. Or two, that they can go out to the open marketplace that we talked about that was created by deregulation and enter into an agreement, enter into a contract with a third-party supply company. These companies are commonly called ESCOs, and that ESCO stands for Energy Supply Companies. So there's an asterisk on Central Hudson in here because, again, that is a New York State determined default. That means if you make no choice, you get that. Somebody has to choose to opt out of that choice to take advantage of an individual contract if they want to. So those are the two choices. Now you can see there's a third box there down below. And for a community that launches a CCA program, that third box will be filled by the CCA choice. All right, now I'm going to expand upon this slide, and I've added a table for solar in addition to adding the CCA choice to the third option that's in the electricity supply box. Now, again, if you just picture the analogy that this is a menu in a restaurant where maybe the table on the left are your appetizers and the table on the right are your entrees, you can only pick one from each of these menus. So just focusing first on the electricity supply, we've talked about the three choices, but now we see that in a community choice aggregation community that's launched a CCA, the CCA choice, what the aggregation of communities, what the group of communities have gone out to the marketplace to get in terms of electricity supply rates, has the asterisk on it now. That means that that's the default choice. It means that if this program launches, that people will have that as their default choice unless they choose not to participate. So there's no restrictions, there's no lock-in through a CCA program. It does have the power because it is the new default choice, but it is never a restriction that people can't choose at any time to take advantage of the other two electricity supply choices. Now, this idea of electricity supply choice has gotten confused. It is frequently confused, especially these last couple of years, because of a number of choices that are available on the right side with regards to solar opportunities, what people can choose in terms of solar. There are three choices here. Again, you can choose one of these options. You can't have more than one. But they break down as follows. The first choice on the solar table is you can make no choice about solar. You don't have to do anything about solar. You can just be a utility customer and just either use any one of these choices for supply on the other side and do nothing in terms of solar. But many people have either done this or exploring putting solar on their home or business, a solar PV system to generate electricity. That's choice B. There is a third choice now that's been enabled in New York State, also right about 2016, that allows people to become virtual owners of solar. So instead of putting a solar system on their home or business, they can choose to become a virtual subscriber, a virtual owner of a portion of a field of solar panels, a large field of solar panels. And by doing so, they enable that project to happen. And in return, they get a monetary credit. They get a discount off of their electricity bill. The choices in these two tables can be mixed and matched. And there is an ability for the CCA program to offer both of these options, both electricity supply option, a fixed rate, and a community solar option, a subscription to community solar. Both can be offered as an opt-out basis without any contract, which an individual customer would have to do, without any restrictions, but also as an opt-out way. So people would have to choose not to be part of it, which the idea of why a community does this, well, there's numerous reasons why they do it. And I'll talk about the benefits, the three win-win-win scenarios. But not least of those benefits is the fact that there can be confusion about the benefits associated with electricity supply choice or by choosing solar. So what this program allows communities to do, working in partnership with other communities and the administrator, they vet the decisions and offer a simple package option that is structured to yield benefits to the community members without any restrictions. And that's why it's allowed to operate as an opt-out program. But these two elements can be offered as the opt-out choice. Now, moving on, let's look in a little deeper about understanding where these two programs, where supply decisions live on the utility bill and where a solar decision lives on the utility bill. This is my promised image of my utility bill. I live in Beacon, New York, and I'm a Central Hudson customer. And I am both part of a CCA program. The city of Beacon is a member in an existing community choice aggregation program. That's been in operation since the middle of 2019. And I am also a subscriber to a community solar project. So there are three sections on this one page of the bill that tells an interesting story about how the electricity marketplace works. The top almost half of the bill shows the electricity delivered, or the delivery section. And you can see the green bar right above the red box says total electricity delivery charges. You can see my total electricity usage for the month, 761 kilowatt hours. That's how much electricity I consumed in this particular month. And there are numerous line items that are multiplied, that usage is multiplied by a rate for delivery for those various line items in the delivery section. When you multiply by my usage times those different charges for those various delivery charges and add them up, that's my total electricity delivery charges. And that is what Central Hudson makes money on. As I said before, they are really a delivery company. And so that's what they get paid for. You could even see the first line item on there is a basic service charge. And that's $20 per month that each of us pays for every meter that might be on our property. So that's all part of the basic service, which includes repair service and billing service, everything that Central Hudson does and will continue to do, whether a community is a CCA community or not. All right, so after we talk after the delivery section, the middle portion of the bill in that top red box, this is where the supply charges are located. And before I was in a CCA program, there were three different line items in there that are added up for the pass-through cost for this total supply charges that Central Hudson has on there when they're helping with the supply decision, when they're making the supply decision. And again, those dollars are passed through to the suppliers that are selected. When you're in a CCA program, there is just one fixed rate for every month of the program. And the program that Beacon is in is a 2-year program. So since the start of the program, which was July of 2019, I've had that same rate of 6.361 cents per kilowatt hours on my bill. As shown here, it's in dollars. So it's 0.06361, meaning I'm paying 6.361 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's multiplied by the number of kilowatt hours I used for my total supply charges. So that is the section that is affected by or is changed by participation in a CCA electricity supply program. And again, one single fixed line item to be part of the program with the same rate every month. Your usage will vary, as it does, because you use different amounts of electricity. So the total charge might change, but the rate stays the same. That 6.361 number, the 0.06361 number stays the same. What is also shown in the supply section, you can see your electricity supplier is Direct Energy, the third line below the top of the red box line. It doesn't tell me that I'm in a CCA program on my bill, but it does tell us the name of the supplier that the aggregation of communities, that the partner communities with the administrator chose through a request for proposal process, through a competitive bid, to be the supplier for this program. And the name of the company that was picked and has the restrictions on them to give us the fixed rate without any other restrictions on the customers of the members of these communities was Direct Energy. Okay, so that's what it looks like for supply when you're in a program. Electricity supply is what it's what you pay for each month for the electricity you consume that month. And through this program, that 6.361 cents per kilowatt hour, 6.361 cents per kilowatt hour, is for 100% renewables from New York State. And so that is a requirement of the program, that that renewables sold through the program are either wind, solar, or hydropower from New York State. And that is a very competitive rate compared to what individual customers could do in the open marketplace. So that's the advantage of what a CCA does. It's in essence a buying club like Costco or BJ's Wholesale, that by the aggregation of these communities with all of their community members that they represent. That's how you get the leverage to get these very competitive rates for what would be a lot more expensive for individual customers should they enter into an individual energy supply company contract or an ESCO contract. All right, now that is the electricity supply section, different than the community solar description or where solar credits exist. As a community solar subscriber, I was assigned a portion of a solar field that is in Central Hudson territory. So the project that I support by becoming a subscriber has to be in Central Hudson territory since I'm a Central Hudson customer. And it is a type of project that the state has enabled so that the benefits of solar can be shared by customers who can't or have not put solar on their homes. If you remember that previous menu table, you can't do both. And so if you can't do B and you want to do something about solar, choice B, you can do choice C, which is community solar. And in essence, the way that benefit is shared is by becoming a subscriber to a field of solar panels for which the project developer has to get a virtual owner or a subscriber for every one of those solar panels. In return for that, I get a monetary discount on my utility bill. And you can see for this month, it was $81.01. That was reduced. My electric bill was reduced by $81 for being a subscriber to a community solar project. That is not associated with how much electricity I use that month. It's based on how much my portion of that solar field generated that month. And my portion is based on my average usage over a year. So they looked at my average usage when I started the program, but it's not associated with what I use that month. So that's how it differs from the electricity supply decision. These are two methods by which that customers in these communities can contribute to more renewables coming on to the New York State grid. The electricity supply program, by focus and use of a fixed rate for a supplier that is a 100% renewable supplier in New York State, puts more renewables on the New York State grid. And as a subscriber to Community Solar, I helped create a project. I helped a project go live that is in Central Hudson territory, also part of the New York State grid, but even has more local benefits. The CCA program is that fixed rate. The Community Solar part of the program, if Gardiner chooses to go forward with it, would be a monetary credit. Again, these are based on opportunities in the open marketplace. So a customer, as we talked about with our menu tables, can go out and get an independent energy supply contract at any time. If the community has launched a CCA program and they don't want to be part of it and they want to get their own contract, they can. If they have an existing contract when the program starts, they're not included. They don't have to opt out since they already have a contract. So that's how the program works in terms of eligible customers. Again, if somebody has a supply contract with like Ambit or Viridian or Green Mountain Energy, they don't have to, they're not kicked out of it and they don't have to change, they can stay. Anybody can join the program at any time if they want to, though, if they end their contract and join. Similarly, many people have signed up already to be subscribers to community solar projects with companies like Nexamp or Ampion or numerous others that are out there. If Gardiner was to go forward with an opt-out community solar program, those customers would be unaffected. Their contract would still be in place, and they wouldn't have to make a choice about being part of this program. Similarly, if somebody didn't have community solar when this program started and this opportunity was offered to them on an opt-out basis, they could say, nope, I don't want to do this. I want to go out and get my own contract. They can do so. So the idea of this is a new default choice potentially for both electricity supply and possibly community solar, which can be rejected at any time. There's no penalties, there's no sign-on fees. It is just, it's the reason it's allowed to be offered as an opt-out is because it is a public benefit allowed by the municipal decisions, by a local law, for their community members to benefit from good opportunities that exist in the electricity marketplace. All right, so a lot to say on my utility bill. I'm going to move on to the next slide. This is the process, and this is where we are in the process to launching and to exploring and potentially launching a CCA program or a community choice aggregation program. Step number one, as I've said a number of times, it starts with that municipality, the city or town or village, or the town of Gardiner in this specific case, passing a local law, which they did back in, I think, in the middle of last year. With the public hearing, they had public comment period, but they passed this enabling local law to allow them to continue the exploration of community choice aggregation. The second step is to pick an administration approach, and there are hundreds of communities that have passed the local laws in New York. About half of them have picked an administrator, which is the second step to continuing the exploration. It's part of what the state requires for this process of doing a CCA program. After picking an administrator, there is a public outreach and education period. It's a minimum of 2 months, and that's where we are right now, kind of near the beginning of this public outreach and education period. And so these public meetings where we invite people to come and learn about the program, and we are spreading the word in numerous ways, is part of the process. This is my one ask of people that are attending tonight, is if you have suggestions for how we can be more effective in terms of spreading the word, and you can spread the word in any ways you can, that's what we ask. So please share your ideas with us, or please just spread the word about what's happening with this program, including for other meetings that are taking place. And we do have more meetings that people can come and attend, but we are also very happy to come to attend other group meetings. Like a seniors club meeting or a Lions club meeting or a Kiwanis club. If anyone has a scheduled meeting and they want us to come speak for a short period, we can do a 10-minute overview of this program. All right, so that's where we are. After this, there are requirements to make sure that we're doing everything the way that the state requires. So there's an approval and a data request period, at which point you get to the ability to go out to the marketplace and see if this makes sense in terms of what the market looks like and the potential benefits for the community members. So that's getting towards step 5, where the communities together, through an aggregation of communities, will put a request for proposals for supply prices for supply, and for potentially, should the community choose to do it, for supply of community solar subscriptions for the community. And if everything looks good, then you move on to step 6. If the requirements are met that the community wanted to see for its community members, then you can award the contract and then move to a kickoff program, followed by step 7, more education and outreach. And then you move towards switching people into the program for those who chose to stay in the program, and then program launch. And program launch is where the program elements are put onto each individual customer's central Hudson bill. So again, all of this is done through Central Hudson's bill. Logistically, nothing changes. Important to note that we are still very much above this go, no-go point in the process. This is the exploration phase. And the testing in the market is not too far away, but it's that's the point where we will look and see what's possible, and the community has an ability to say, this looks great, we want to go forward, or things aren't looking promising. This doesn't look like it'll be beneficial for our community, and we're not going to go forward. So that's right between steps 5 and 6. So that is the overview in some depth about what community choice aggregation is, and its 2 components, about electricity supply under CCA and what an opt-out community solar program can be under CCA. This is the second bullet, talking about existing Joule programs that are here in the Hudson Valley. This is Hudson Valley Community Power, is the partnership program of 10 communities that are all shown in the lower left of this slide. So these 10 communities, including Beacon, the city where I live, are part of this aggregation, this community choice aggregation. And you can see the town of Clinton, which is in Dutchess, the village of Cold Spring, which is in Putnam, the town of Fishkill, which is in Dutchess, the town of Barbletown, which is in Ulster, right next door to Gardiner, I'm sure you realize. Both New Paltz is town and village, of course, as well. Phillipstown, which is in Putnam, the city of Poughkeepsie, and the town of Red Hook, which are both in Dutchess, are all current partner communities in the Hudson Valley Community Power Program. All of those communities chose Jewel Community Power, which is the logo in the lower left of this slide, to be their administrator. And Jewel, wanting to go above and beyond the requirements of service to the communities and outreach opportunities and support for the community members, chose my nonprofit, Hudson Valley Energy, to be a local program manager for the program. So that's my logo between Jewel and the Direct Energy logo. And you might remember that Direct Energy is the supplier that we chose back in the earlier part of 2019 for this aggregation program. You see Central Hudson's logo right there in the middle bottom, and that's to remind people that this does not replace Central Hudson. Everything for which Central Hudson made money on before CCAs are launched stays the same. So Central Hudson is the logistical partner through which we use their billing, and if should there be storm damage, they're still the delivery company that does all that repair work. So nothing that Central Hudson does changes if a community goes forward with CCA. The lower right has some information sources if you want to dig into more detail, including you can find other events that I'll show at the end of our presentation tonight on a slide, recordings of other events from past events, FAQs about both the supply portion of the program and the community solar elements of the program, and just press and other things that have happened in and around the program. There's lots of good information on the partnership website, which is hudsonvalleycommunitypower.com. And there's other social media mechanisms that you can follow what we're doing. So you're going to see another slide like this in a little bit, but let me talk about the benefits, the why again about CCA on this next slide, which is in many ways a reflection about what's been achieved through the Hudson Valley Community Power Program, which, I forgot I put this on here, this is the program that the 4 additional communities shown above that blue arrow are joining or considering joining, including the town of Gardiner. Other communities are Rhinebeck, the town of Saugerties, and the village of Nelsonville. So we might have 14 communities going out to be in part of a new contract, which would start in July of 2021, if every community decides to stay in the program. It speaks to also, actually before I move on, the logistics of how a CCA program works in terms of rates. Lots of people have tried the independent energy supply marketplace, and many people have gone into that marketplace for one of 2 reasons. 1, to look for a better rate on electricity, or 2, to promote renewables. As I'll talk about in the next slide, the benefit of CCA is that you can marry them together. But in that exploration of rates, many people have had an experience where they've gotten into a contract where the rate was fixed for a period and then turned variable, and maybe crazy things happened to it and went way high, and they had trouble getting out of the contract. CCA is structured where it is a fixed rate, as we said, and it's also for a fixed period. In selecting the supplier for this program, there is this current program is a 2-year contract, and it's not to be a pilot program. It's the idea is that it is a fixed period so that people know exactly how long the program lasts, to remove any kind of uncertainty or to leave them trapped in something that they may be not paying attention to in 2 years' time. So by state requirements, a program can't just continue indefinitely. It has to be repeated, not just extended, but it has to be repeated. So that's what's happening right now with the 10 communities in the lower left. As we approach the end of their 2-year contract, we're in conversation for them to go out again to do a new contract. And we're talking about now adding these 4 communities as part of that process, so that potentially it will be 14 communities altogether in the new contract for Hudson Valley Community Power. Now, the program benefits. There are numerous reasons why this program is allowed and why cities and towns and villages are exploring it. The 3 buckets of benefit are, there are environmental benefits, program rate benefits, cost benefits, and customer protection benefits. And there's a lot of focus initially in conversations around the marriage, the win-win scenario that you can promote access to renewable electricity supply at a very competitive rate. So that's kind of marrying together the environmental with the program rate benefit. And that is certainly what this program is structured to do. But the consumer protection should not be overlooked because as I spoke about in the previous slide, lots of people have had bad experiences in the marketplace. So this program is structured to give certainty and to prevent any of that strangeness from happening in terms of the opportunities. What were the environmental benefits of our current program? Those 10 communities represent more than 25,000 Hudson Valley households, with the majority of the members of those 10 communities all choosing to stay with a 100% renewable electricity supply. Because of that, through the end of about the year 2020, more than 200,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions were avoided because the members of those communities were paying for only renewable supply from New York State. This has very powerful immediate impacts on the New York grid and also sends very powerful signals for more demand coming onto the New York State grid. And it's not to be underestimated that you can double your impact by both being a supply customer and promoting local projects through community solar. In terms of the program rate, it is the negotiated low fixed supply rate that is very competitive with non-renewable utility rates. When Central Hudson makes that monthly decision for its customers, it doesn't emphasize renewables. The majority of what they supply is nuclear and fossil-based sourcing for electricity. They do have a requirement for some renewables, but it's a very small percent. This program, in the power of numbers buying club, is able to get a fixed rate for 100% supply that is very competitive and can be better than the utility rate for non-renewables, which it is. It is certainly better, though, than the third bullet, than what people could do on their own for private contracts with an energy supply company. And so the first two bullets under program rates, our program fixed supply rate versus the second, that's an apples to oranges comparison, renewables to non-renewables. The first and third bullet is our renewables compared to what people could do for comparable renewables. That's an apples to apples comparison. And in that regard, we are certainly much better in terms of program rate. The customer protection, I've mentioned much of this already, but there are no restrictions. There's no participation minimums, no restrictions. It is, people can opt in or opt out of the program at any time with no cost or penalty. There is certainty, it's transparency. You know what your fixed supply rate is going to be month after month. So there's no surprises. For example, the current rate from Central Hudson, and I'm sorry to break this news to people if you hadn't heard, but it's up to 10 cents per kilowatt hour, the last published rate. So that will be quite a surprise to a lot of people in terms of a much larger bill than they anticipated. Not for members of the CCA program. They're still paying the 6.361 cents per kilowatt hour. It's fixed for that fixed period. And additionally, I realize there's a lot that I'm describing, but we don't go away in terms of program support and education. We are here to answer questions and to make people feel more and more comfortable with navigating the energy marketplace, including potentially taking advantage of a program that Gardiner might launch. All right, so I'm going to just stop for a second and I see a couple of things jumped into the chat window. So the first is from Kay, asking what % discount would we receive on our power bill? And I do talk about this on an upcoming most common questions. For the electricity supply portion of the program, historically, when we launched the Hudson Valley Community Power Program, we had a benchmark requirement, basically a number to beat. And we told the suppliers you had to beat the average, the 12-month average that people had paid for non-renewables through Central Hudson. And what we came out with was a number that was 6.361 cents was 7% lower than what people had paid for non-renewables. So the anticipation for supply, it's not the biggest savings, but it is better. And it's certainly better than the private marketplace for comparable 100% renewables, but it's somewhere between 5 to 10% of the supply rate, which is separate than what people can do if they subscribe to community solar, which for a private contract can be 10% off the entire electricity bill. And it's not affecting the rate. Again, that's a monetary discount. So that's a 10% savings of the entire delivery and supply charges. The question also from Kay is, when do you expect the choice to be available to Gardiner? I'm going to revisit the timeline in a couple of minutes. So instead of talking about that, you'll see the timeline coming up in a slide not too far from now. All right, so those are I have the win-win-win chalkboard image right there. That's the idea of this program. Numerous elements of environmental benefits with rate benefits, with customer protection benefits all overlapping through the program. This is the administration team in 2 slides. Jewel, again, is the state-approved administrator for community choice aggregation programs. They're the entity that's been authorized by having an approved administration plan that they submitted to the state and had it approved to represent municipalities throughout the CCA process. They are a known entity. They're really very experienced with understanding how CCA programs work. And so the state turns to them for guidance on that. And they're overseeing a number of CCA programs in New York State. And their approach is to include a local program manager to be the local face and support network for these programs. And again, that's my organization. Here's slide 2 of the team. So I am a nonprofit. We are the organization that leads outreach and education and customer support efforts. We're there for the duration of the program. It's not just something where we're here in the beginning. We are a resource throughout the life of the program, sharing data, comparisons to rates, doing ongoing education. We have courses to help people really understand their utility bills. We are developing free courses for people to understand the energy market, the energy grid better, just because that's what we do. And that's what we're excited by, is empowering these communities with more understanding about how the grid works. So this slide is still, we're in the section talking about existing Jewel programs. This slide looks a lot like the Hudson Valley Community Power slide, but it's different. It's a different program that launched in the end of 2020, in October of 2020. And this is a program that launched in Orange and Rockland territory. So you can see where Central Hudson's logo was located. Now it's Orange and Rockland. And this is 6 communities that are part of this partnership called Rockland Community Power. And there are 6 communities which are all in Rockland County. And that's Clarkstown, Orangetown, the village of Haverstraw, Nyack, South Nyack, and Upper Nyack. All of those communities chose Jewel to be their administrator, and Jewel still has my organization as a support partner for the program. But you can see that through the RFP bid process, we picked a different supply company for the electricity supply portion of the program, and that's Constellation. So they're in the spot where Direct Energy was in the previous program. Similar to the Hudson Valley Community Power partnership website, there is a website that's very similar for this partnership program called the Rockland Community Power.com website. And similar information is available there, but it's another great resource to check and see what's understanding the program. So this is the promised slide on timeline. You saw this slide before in terms of the steps. Now, on the right side here, I'm going to enter in the timeline for when we expect things to happen should Gardiner move forward to be part of that renewal of the Hudson Valley Community Power Program. So as indicated, now we're in the step 3, the public outreach and education period. And then we are moving into anticipating that we'll issue the bid if all works out well and the community decides to proceed to be part of the bid for default energy offerings. That'll be in May of this year, where the turnaround and launch of the program will start about June, and that will happen with if the community decides to go forward, a letter will be sent to every eligible customer in Gardiner and the other communities describing the program and the elements and how to opt out of the program. So lots of details will be sent to every customer indicating that they're going to be part of this program, but indicating how they cannot be if they don't want to be, with the intent that this will be followed up by a launch of the program where people will have it on their utility bills by July of 2021, assuming that Gardiner stays in the program and proceeds. So that's the question of when we would expect those program elements, these choices to be available. So the choices will be evident in June, and then you'll be part of the program in July. So what happens next? We continue this first phase of the community education for Gardiner and the other partner communities. Then afterwards, there is the bid, as we talked about, for electricity supply and possibly for community solar, if Gardiner decides to include an opt-out community solar as well. That is, if the bids for both of those and separate bids are accepted and move forward, there is a second round of education where we will have the details. Instead of talking about this in general terms, in that second round of education, after the bid comes in and the communities decide to proceed, we will know the price, we'll know the supply rate, we'll know the term of the contract, we'll know the percentage of savings, and we will know the sources of the electricity supply. And if it's done for community solar, we'll know about how much supply there will be of community solar. As I mentioned before, the next step is that a letter is mailed to all eligible residents and small businesses that are part of the program. And that includes the detail of price and term and savings and source, as I mentioned. It includes the program FAQ, and it includes information about what to do if you don't want to be part of the program, if you want to opt out. And again, this goes to all eligible customers. So if somebody has an existing supply contract, they're not included. If somebody has a block on their Central Hudson account because maybe they had a bad experience with energy supply companies in the past, they're not included as well. There's other elements, but it's for everyone whose Central Hudson has shared with the supply company that is eligible will be included and receive this letter. So what is included in the letter in terms of opt-out methods? Any one of these methods are sufficient to opt out of the program. Somebody could send in the postage paid mailer. There is an envelope that is postage paid, so you don't need to put a stamp on it. Then you can just sign a slip of paper, the opt-out reply card, put it in the envelope and send it in. That's during the 30-day minimum opt-out period that happens after the program letters are sent. We have a hotline or helpline phone number that somebody can call at any time, and we can take information over the phone. There's a website that people can use, a form on the partnership website at the HudsonValleyCommunityPower.com website, where people can just say, I don't want to be part of this. Here's my information from the mailer, and you're done. In the good old days, and maybe not too far distant future, you could share that information with us in person, either at the office hours that we hope to hold again in the communities sometime soon, or at any one of the public meetings that we'll be doing in terms of continued outreach after the program launches. And we have an email address, so you can also do it by email. The last four options all have an asterisk. I like using asterisks on them for the footnote that says this is opt-out methods, but again, anybody could also opt back into the program at any time. It is truly like a public benefit program, like a public swimming pool or a public tennis court that the community has created for their community members. But in this case, it's about electricity supply choices and potentially for community solar subscriptions. It's offered as a public benefit without restrictions, without contracts, so people have complete flexibility, no restrictions, and it's there for them. So getting towards the end, here are the common questions that we often get in our interactions with folks. The first question that we commonly get, does this replace my utility company? And wanted to stress that absolutely not. It does not replace Central Hudson for anything that Central Hudson makes money on. So they won't do anything punitive either. Some people have said, will they raise my delivery charge if I'm part of your CCA program and they're not doing the supply decision? No, they make money on delivery and they have to go through a formal process if they ever want to raise their delivery charges. And this program does not affect what they make money on. Why are you doing this? How can you do this? I had that question asked of me today by a town that's considering this and saying, I need to be able to answer this question for my community members. It's because of the three overlapping benefits that it's structured as a public benefit. So it's a way to cut through a lot of potential confusion and a lot of bad experiences that people have had in the past to give them a vetted option to take advantage of good things that is a win-win. It's a win-win for all of us too. In that not only can this be cost beneficial for people, but it also puts renewables onto the New York State grid, helping us to meet our, the goals that we have as a state for putting more renewables to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it's very beneficial in numerous ways. Will the program save me money? As I mentioned in response to Kay's question, somewhere between 5 to 10% is the goal for supply versus the average that people have paid for non-renewables through the utility. But it's not guaranteed. That supply rate, the one risk of the supply program is that the utility rate could be lower than our rate, which does happen some months. But it's anticipated, particularly when demand is higher in the hot summer months and the cold winter months when electricity use is up, that's where our program fixed rate is truly beneficial. The same question for community solar versus supply. Will it save me money? The answer is simply yes. And so, people who are exploring community solar with other companies independently, it seems too good to be true, but it is really structured to be very beneficial programs. So the simple answer is yes there. Am I locked into this for the duration of the contract? No. Anyone could exit freely at any time. What happens after the supply contract ends? Will the rate go crazy? And again, this is what I spoke to from reflecting on bad experiences that people have had in independent contracts, I think is where this question comes from. It is a fixed period contract. It can be repeated, but it ends at a certain period of time. If the communities don't repeat, they go right back to the utility making their supply decision. They don't have to take any additional action. So again, it can be repeated, but if the contract ends, everyone automatically goes back to the utility company making their decision. Where does the energy come from? Again, there's two different answers here for the two different programs that are under the CCA umbrella. For the supply, the renewables have to come from New York State, have to be connected to New York State grid to be eligible for the program. For community solar, it's a local solar farm right in Central Hudson Territory. And so two different ways that you can promote renewables onto the grid with two different financial mechanisms. We do have more upcoming events. We are here at the top event, the March 16th event here in Gardiner, our virtual meetings. But we have for the other communities, a number of other public events. March 24th, 25th, weekend days, weekend and weeknights events. All of these events with the meeting links, you don't have to register, can be found at hudsonvalleycommunitypower.com/events. Whole listing of those public events with the meeting links that you can join at any time. Please share this with anybody you think would be interested in. Share that link with them and encourage them to come to a meeting or to contact us at the information I'll put at the end so they can ask us to set up a private meeting or a different meeting at a different time. Happy to do it. So this is our program information, and I thank everyone for their patience in getting through this presentation. It went a little bit longer than I anticipated. But I don't see any other questions in the chat window. Oh, I do see one. Says, no, there's a couple now. Okay, let's see. From the start of the chat windows, but people can start to get ready to ask questions directly if they like. But what determines small business eligibility? Relatively simple answer, but it gets a little bit into the weeds in terms of utility bill language. But larger businesses that have something called a demand meter, which means that they tend to use a lot more electricity than the average small or medium business. And so they have a separate rate, but they have a standing demand charge on their utility bill, are not included for the supply portion of the program or for participation in community solar. So if your small business or institution does not have a demand meter, or if you're a larger institution that has multiple meters, and some of them don't have demand meters, or they're not demand meters with demand meter charges, anything without a demand charge, a demand meter, is eligible. So an institution like a school or a church or a library could have multiple meters. Any of them that don't have a demand meter are part of it, but if it's a business with only a demand meter, then they're not eligible for either one of the programs. They can join if they want, but then you have to do a comparison because they can't get rid of the demand charge, but we can look at the rate they're paying to see if it makes sense economically for them. So a question from Jenny. I just signed a contract with Ampion. Are they amenable to releasing people when a community opts for potentially for this community solar program through the CCA? They tend to have a very good contract. I am familiar with Ampion. They tend not to have a minimum participation, and they don't have a penalty for leaving. But you'd want to make a comparison to make sure it made sense. to leave. It might be just the same benefit through our program that we're offering through the CCA, and you're better off just staying in your current contract. But I do know that they do generally have good contracts, which are flexible for customers. All right, I don't see, let's see, maybe, oh, no, let's see. Yes, from Tess, okay. Tess asked, why were the energy suppliers in two programs different? Did communities put more into the RFP besides cost? So you're saying, I think, Tess, you're asking about the how we went with direct energy for one of the programs and for Constellation for the other. I'm assuming energy suppliers for the two different programs. It's a matter of who bids and whether they are interested at the time that they bid in complying with trying to be competitive in the market price, and also complying with all of the requirements that Jewel would have for their participation, just making sure that they are really focused on being customer friendly. I think with the second program with Rockland Community Power too, Direct Energy didn't actually bid on that one. I think that they felt that at the time they might have had their hands full with the CCAs and other things that they had going on. But there's just a matter of competitiveness and current position for the most part that figures into it. To your question though, do communities put more into the RFP besides cost? More into the RFP besides cost. Well, yes, I mean, it's sourcing could be a requirement. You know, that's one of the things that we seek is that they seek a default 100% renewable supply. There could be specific requests for a type of source that they want to include. We allow hydropower, wind, and solar. There could be more specific asks for that as well. Trying to think other elements that could be baked into the RFP. Contract length, you know, basically there's a standard approach to making sure that there's no restrictions on community members. I think that for the most part that covers the major details that the community would have a comment on in terms of elements. Jenny says just CCA with a question mark. Was that a carryover from the other one? Community CCA. I think you're just finishing out your statement on that. All right. Yeah, thanks. All right, Tess. All right, good. If I didn't answer any of those questions fully, please jump off mute and ask your question, or if anyone else who didn't ask a question who would like to ask a question, please do so. I am going to stay here and I'll do my promised awkward silence while you guys think about and play with mute buttons to just to answer questions, to ask questions directly. Is there a question from somebody, or is that somebody leaving? We will make these slides available to the community, as well as a link to the recording. Excuse me. We did a presentation back on February 20th, and that recording is also already available through, I think, the town website. I'm still here if anyone has any questions. I got my one of my team members, Jake, is on the line with us tonight. So you might, if you're in and around and we do get to do things within community or at future public meetings, Jake Mitchell will be somebody you might hear from. Jake, you there?
I am here. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I look forward to working with you all.
That's good.
Yeah.
Any other statements? Anything else you want to share? Or anything I kind of missed, or you recommend we share?
That's a good question. I think you covered pretty much everything, but I'll think on it for just a minute here and see if anything comes up.
I just think it's good for people to hear a different voice after I've been talking to them for over an hour. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Hi, I just had a quick question. Hi,
Please.
everyone. Hey, hi. My name is Sangeeta. I just moved to Gardiner in July. I inherited solar panels from the previous owner, and I have all my charges through, I guess, let me see. Um, I don't know the name of the company even. So the one that everybody uses around here. What should be my first step to join a CCA?
So you moved and you bought a house that has solar panels on them already?
Yes, and I'm leased on them. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a leased arrangement on them, and I do believe it's still basically a net metering arrangement. I mean, it's a little different than ownership, but is there, do you get a benefit for production? I mean, are you receiving benefit for having the lease system on your house, or are you just
Uh,
receiving a monetary benefit for the system?
I don't know. So when I called, they said to wait until the summertime because that's when they'll know more.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's probably based on the way a typical ownership system or other lease arrangements take place. In which case, for the community solar component, if you keep the solar system on your house, which could be a great thing, you could not do community solar, as we talked about. So that's just, you're doing choice B on that right side menu.
Yes. Yes.
So you couldn't do community solar. Now, on the supply side, there should be relatively no impact, except for the fact that you would benefit less. Because the way a typical solar system, when it's on your residence or business, you have the same type of arrangements where you have established that you get credits for the production that discount the amount of electricity charges you pay. And if you overproduce, you get paid a wholesale price that can actually be cost beneficial. You can actually have a revenue benefit to having the
Mhm.
system. What that means, though, in terms of use, those people who have solar systems on their place tend to need to buy a lot less electricity than someone who doesn't have a system on their place.
Okay.
They still need to buy some, typically, especially during the winter time, which is why they're probably telling you to see how the system does in the summertime.
That's what they said. Yes.
So during the winter time, you're almost like there's probably some discount, there's probably some displacement of electricity use by your system's production, but you're buying electricity at whatever rate for supply Central Hudson happens to be charging at that time.
Okay.
So if you could be and you would be automatically included in the CCA supply program, and you'd have the fixed rate. So for the times that you are buying electricity, you'd pay the fixed rate, which we anticipate would be better on average than Central Hudson's rate. It matters less in the summertime though, or average that over the year, like I said. So versus somebody who doesn't have a solar system, who's not displacing some of their costs, your benefit of being in the CCA fixed rate would be smaller overall, just because you're buying less at the supply rate than somebody else might be. So
Okay.
you're in a good position, but you still could benefit. And if you keep the system and you stay in the program and the community goes forward and it's a 100% renewable rate, you're just doubling up the benefit of what you're doing as a homeowner with solar and only paying for renewables from New York State.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions? I think we have the same collection of folks who were here at the start, so I think there's no community leaders that have joined us tonight.
There is another meeting going on simultaneously. That's probably why.
That's right. Franco Carucci told me that. That's right. And that's why he's concerned about this one. So, but I'm glad we had people attend. It was pretty good attendance given that. And we did talk about scheduling an additional meeting because of the conflict that was discovered relatively late.
So you had asked for a suggestion. So for somebody like me who's new to everything
Yes.
and is new to solar panels, new to electric, I literally don't even think about it because it's so simple. Um, it would be nice to have pamphlets or someplace where everything is broken down and always available to new owners as they come in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We have some materials that we're working on distributing throughout the community too.
Yeah.
Um, And yeah, that's what we're working on, making sure that there's some simple understandings. And anything you could suggest, we're going to be dropping off materials and sharing with a team within Gardner, but we're going to be dropping stuff off at the town hall and distributing to the library and numerous other locations too.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I don't see any other questions in the chat window. Yeah, looks like I got all the questions in the chat window. Tess, you're welcome. Thank you for being here tonight.
I'm going to sign off also, but this was very informative. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for coming.
Take care. Bye.
Have a good night.
You too.
I'm going to stop the recording.